Hey, welcome to another episode of Just Say It. I am Matt Patrick, joined as usual with Chase. Last episode you weren't here. You were gone.
Not.
It was Derek here. So Chase is back, which is great. Hey, before we dive in, just want to make sure if you are at the Well Church and it's your home church, maybe you're checking out our church, we want to make sure that you know about what we have going on over the summer and quite frankly every Sunday. But we offer Sunday school here at the Well. It's usually a study around something like we just got done doing the 1689 London Baptist Confession, but we're going to be moving into, for the summer months, a study in the book of Revelation, not the book of Revelations, which is a personal pet peeve of mine.
That is, yes.
Which is funny that I have pet peeves on pronunciation when I struggle with it so much. But so that starts at 8 a.m. every Sunday. So if you're in Boulder, if this is your church, we would encourage you to attend Sunday school. It's a great way to just get a good Bible study in and kind of maximize your Sunday. I'd also say kids are welcome to join. So don't be afraid like, oh, my kids are going to be everywhere. Totally fine. We welcome that. So hope to see you each Sunday morning at Sunday school. Also coming up, we have Burn the Ships this summer, August 1st and 2nd. Really excited about that. I know we've been pushing it hard. It's just because we love it. It's going to be a blast. I think I'm probably most excited. I was like, oh, the speakers. I'm actually most excited about the concert. I think that'll be a lot of fun. So we're going to have a guy named Jordan Kirk who's going to be here. Jordan Robert Kirk. Is that a Texas thing? Do y'all go by all three names often?
Yeah, my father-in-law, Charles Ray Huddleston.
Yeah, I
Doyle, Elvis Doyle Davis was my granddad. Robert Earl Keene.
Great one.
Yeah.
I mean, mine just doesn't land as well. Matthew James Patrick.
No, it doesn't. Ray Wiley Hubbard.
Yeah, those are good.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Joshua Chase Davis. That doesn't really have the same effect.
I gotcha. Anyways, there's going to be a great concert on Friday night with Jordan Robert Kirk, country singer, musician. He's coming up with one of his bandmates, and they're going to be performing on Friday night. And so that's all included with your ticket. So make sure you get your ticket soon. If you're bringing a group from either our church or anywhere, let us know. All the information is on our website, but we have a special group discount. And as always, college guys, we got a discount there for you as well, because we want to make it affordable for everybody, but also cover our bases financially on this thing. So hopefully you can attend if you're a guy. Mark your calendars, August 1st and 2nd. So that's a few things going on. Let's dive into the topic. Chase, actually, we're not. We're doing our opening segment. I'll let you introduce the opening segment.
Yeah,
Chase.
as we have been doing, we're going to try to be more transparent, or apparently Gen Z is very into authenticity. If you know the history of our church, we too were interested in authenticity, still are.
No longer.
In being very authentic. Muy authentico here at the Well. And so we are going to continue doing our opening segment where we talk about tweets. We don't know what they are until we get in the studio.
Correct.
And so Matt gets to go first this morning.
Oh, okay.
On May 13th,
okay,
you tweeted, "I feel led to confess my Anon account. Many have suspected this account belongs to me. I figured just come out with it before it turns into a whole thing. My Anon is at J. Chase Davis." Wow, this is big news. It got 4,000 impressions, which is not bad. So tell me more about this tweet, Matt.
Oh, man. Well, we could go into many realms on this one. We could talk about the Anon world and all that. But no, it was actually rooted in, there was quite a dust-up on the internet last week.
Oh, yeah.
With, how do you say the guy's last name?
I think it's Bice.
Bice?
Yeah, I think it's Bice.
There was a guy who was part of an organization called G3, some other stuff. Basically, he got busted with a bunch of Anons. If you don't know what an Anon is, that's an anonymous account. And we love Anons, actually. Anons can be very useful and helpful.
Can be. Yes, they are permissible.
Yes, you actually have a podcast on your show about Anons. And if people want to learn more about Anons, they can go there. But it can also be used for bad things. And so this man was using his Anons to trash the brethren.
His own organization. It was wild to watch. He's the executive director of it. It makes no sense.
It makes no sense. It was very dumb all around. But there was like a lot of debate going on around Anons and whether Christians should have them. And, if you're doing it for nefarious reasons. And so since Chase is rather prolific on the on the X and other now recently Facebook, which is an interesting choice. But I just decided to kind of play a little joke out there and try to convince the world that Chase's X profile really wasn't him. It's been me the whole time.
Yeah, right. That's great.
And so
thank you for that.
Just playing.
Clearly a joke, by the way. You can do that on the internet, believe it or not. So it's fun times.
Our friends liked it. There started a whole entire thing where people are going, it got into the whole entire Fight Club thing. It's like people started saying, now that I think about it, I've never seen Matt or Chase in the same room at the same time. Maybe they're the same person. And so, and then the question came up of like, it just kind of came out as hashtag I am Ed Norton.
Yes.
For Chase and I. So, so it was fun.
That's great.
It was a good time.
That's great.
I got to get yours. Let me see here. I actually took a screenshot of it earlier.
Save it, so in case I delete it after this episode.
So if somebody's like, I can't find them, I got you. No, it just always deletes. And you tweet so much. I know I say that every time. This is a fun one. I wish I could have a graphic for it because this involves a photo. But let me describe the photo on the post first. The photo is clouds, a very dramatic scene with an American flag in the background with a cross in front of it and an eagle flying. Beautiful photo. And the caption that Chase wrote, which, by the way, it's in all caps, it says, "They that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles." And then Chase wrote, that's obviously a Bible verse, and then Chase wrote, "They that wait upon the mob get pronouns and needles. Choose wisdom or woke, ! Share if you still trust in the Lord, not the culture." Chase, what's going on here?
How many impressions did that get? Does it say?
It was 3,300.
3,300. That's good. So what I've been doing is there's been a big debate between generations. I referenced Gen Z earlier. I didn't know you were going to reference that tweet, but it's relevant because right now there's a lot of bubbling resentment towards boomers. There's people in our age cohort, millennial, have a lot of distaste for kind of boomer accoutrements and their lifestyle and the choices they've made. There have been books written on this, so it's not just resentment. There's been literature published on what the boomers let happen in America is the thesis, okay? And
yes.
If we have boomer listeners, I'm trying to be as gracious as possible. These posts are actually very gracious. They're trying to show, this is a category of posting, all caps, kind of using very slang that's popular on Facebook among boomer posters on there. Think of an aunt and uncle in a rural area who are near and dear to your heart, that grew up playing football with you, that you ate your favorite Thanksgiving dishes with, but tend to post, if they're conservative on Facebook, very heightened language, and they're willing to dabble in a bit of conspiratorial thinking, and they're trying to get the people going, and they're sounding off. And so I think my thesis is that while there may be problems with the boomers and there may be problems with millennials, yes, we have a lot more in common than people think. I think there can be a great appreciation and respect offered to boomers, especially God-fearing Christian ones of an older generation who saw they saw a lot of stuff before we did. They saw a lot of the cultural decay, the decline of Christianity as a major problem. Now, did they articulate it in highfalutin language like someone like Tim Keller might? No, they didn't. They were articulating things about Barack Obama in very rudimentary terms that many millennials were off put by, and now we look back and go, well, dang, they were right. They were right. And so I am offering an olive branch between generations, trying to make peace between brethren by making a bit of a lighthearted joke with some fun imagery, avoiding Second Commandment violations as much as possible by posting silly graphics, memes that you might see on Facebook from that aunt or uncle in a way that you would say, at first glance, you would say, this is off-putting, but wait a second, I agree with that. I actually agree with that post. And so I'm trying to mess with people a little bit and build a bridge.
Yes. It's funny. Just think the post that aunt or uncle post that makes you kind of just you agree with, but you also, it's kind of cringy.
Yes.
That's the goal. Is there a term for this kind of posting, Chase?
I believe it's called boomer slop. I don't know if that's a popular term. I don't know if we're coining it. I think it's been invented before, but there is such a thing as internet slop.
Yeah.
Just kind of like general posting that's very, the youth call it posting coal, or they did for about 6 months. I don't know. That slang caught on.
Yeah.
But there's all sorts of names for it.
All right. Well, good times. So there's our tweets. As usual, as Chase said in the first time we did this, if there's a tweet that you would like us to explain, feel free to shoot us a message. We would love that. That'd be actually pretty fun if people did that. So feel free to shoot us a message and let us know. We'll keep doing this until somebody tells us to stop. But so far, I've only heard great feedback. I've heard somebody actually told me that they just listened to this part now and turned it off. I said, thanks for sharing that. Don't talk to me anymore. So there's that. So today's topic, Chase, why don't you introduce it? Because it was your idea to get into it.
Well, today's topic, we're recording this, what is it, May 20th? So I don't know about you, but for me, since about spring breakish for our families and for our city, it has felt like kind of a race. It's felt very busy. Both of us have youth sports going on. We had Easter, Good Friday. We had a lot of stuff going on at the church. It's budget season at the church, a lot of meetings. And then throw on top of that, the Colorado legislative session goes from like January till May 7th. And we became aware of a bill on March 28th. March 28th. Friday, March 28th was my wife's birthday. And then we decided to just go after it because of how patently wicked it is. Mm-hmm. And ever since then, until the end of the legislative session, we were involved in a lot of different activities, rallies, testimony, networking, writing letters, trying to get Christians involved in a political fight. And it was a political fight, not just a spiritual fight, and we'll talk a little bit about that. What we wanted to talk about is maybe some lessons learned. I gave a brief recap, but if there's any detail we want to go into how things worked or what was effective, I don't think we need to do a full debrief here. But what we learned, because I know I learned a lot, and so I wanted to share some of my thoughts, but maybe add on to that a little bit.
Yeah, I would just say, if we're going into lessons that we learned, it's that there's a time, and the Bible is very clear about being patient and slow with your words and things like that. But there's times when urgency is needed, when action is required, and there's not a lot of time to really just get everything exactly right. Sometimes action for what is just and right, though it may be imperfect, is necessary and is good. And what we saw, so we ended up just kind of accidentally, more than anything, was forming a bit of a coalition of, I believe, 12 churches.
Yeah, somewhere
initially, something like that.
Yeah,
of pastors who were all outraged by what our leaders in our state were attempting to accomplish, and we just kind of banded together and said, we're just going to do our best to fight this. What my biggest takeaway is this: it doesn't take a lot.
Right.
It doesn't take a lot to have impact. We ultimately did not have the impact we wanted. The bill passed, though much of it was changed and then changed again, and we can get into that if we want. But the bottom line is that there was impact there, and it actually did something very interesting in forcing, by just kind of the sheer momentum of it, a lot of other guys off the bench and to get into the game. That was a big takeaway that I had. Something learned is it doesn't take a lot. You don't need a lot of money. I don't think we spent any money.
No.
Even despite what some online have said, there's rumors out there that we're have lobbyists and we have all this funding coming in. There's no actual formal organization that has been formed.
We welcome it. Boulderwell.org/give.
Yes, please.
No, but the money that was spent was gas money and some sunscreen because it was very sunny at the Capitol.
Yes.
So we did a couple rallies. Those were very fun. I had never spoken at a political rally. It would seem to be something more up Matt's alley, but I enjoyed kind of learning that skill a little bit.
Yep.
And we had pastors speak at the rallies. We had hundreds of people show up. We had representatives, all Republican, who would want to partner with churches because that's the day and age we live in, where that's who's going to partner with churches more than Democrats. And so they spoke at the rallies. We hosted 2 of them. It was a great time. We also, I think lessons learned is there's a lot more activity about these things than I knew. So I think you described it as urgent and responsive in that way, and in a
Correct.
prudential way. I would describe it as, yes, that it did feel that way from our side, but at the same time, we to kind of admit we were slow because this stuff has been going through the legislature, and we're talking specifically about House Bill 2513-12. This type of bill, which mandates speech codes, you can't quote unquote misgender, you can't quote unquote dead name. This is just the kind of like final nail in the coffin. I don't believe it's the final nail in the coffin. They've already made their wishes apparent. The Democrats in the House passed the bill as it originally was conceived, which permitted the government to take custody of children whose parents did not affirm their perceived gender. And so this is the Democrats' agenda. They signed off on that original unamended bill. Mm-hmm. We know what they're about. So it wouldn't surprise me if they keep pushing this thing. My point is that they've been kind of instituting in law through a variety of bills over the last 6 years since they've had control in our state, many, many, many of these laws. And other organizations have already been fighting it. And I don't know why it took this bill to kind of come to our attention and be like, fight. Like, no, we're going to... I think a lot of it is because, and this is where I sympathize with pastors, we just don't know what's going on. You know, it's super... What I learned is it's super complicated. But once you kind of get into the rhythm of things, you kind of understand, oh, this is how the game works. This is how they get bills amended. And I think many of us grew up with like Schoolhouse Rock or, you know, some kind of perception of how government and politics work. That's very like either clean or almost seems confusing, like who all's involved. And so we learned a lot about who's involved. We learned a lot about where money's coming from to fund these initiatives. We learned a lot about who the players are. And like you said, it doesn't take a lot. So it's really one of the things that I reflect upon often is pastors and churches, Christians, will talk about the freedoms we enjoy in America. And yet oftentimes we don't take advantage of those freedoms.
Correct.
And so you can just get up and pull a permit and show up in front of the Capitol and send out a press release. Somebody did that for us. And you just say things that are biblical and true. You could do this.
Yeah, the joke has become, you can just do things.
You can just do things here. It's a wonderful country. And so that's something I've learned. I've also learned, you know, that with a small group of pastors that are friends, a lot can be accomplished just by the camaraderie. We're not aligned on every single dot and tittle of theology, but we do have a sense of conviction and courage to fight and a willingness. You know, there's a willingness to be like, dude, like they want to take kids away from parents and they want to criminalize these things. And like, no, we're not going to stand for it. And I think, you know, we can keep talking about that. But the other thing we want to talk about is, you know, how we interact with other Christians and churches on these matters.
Yeah.
I thought about bringing up, you know, Matt referenced Facebook earlier, and he rarely posts on there, but one thing he posted was a joke, but it had a barb. It was sarcastic. You might say a serrated edge, but, you know, it was pointed at a guy named Dave Runyon, who is I guess an evangelical darling in our state. I didn't know this. I don't know if you knew this.
I did, yeah.
I didn't know this. He wrote the book, The Art of Neighboring. He's kind of a big deal, I guess, in evangelical kind of elite culture in Colorado, which, you know, it's always weird to say, like, I think you've talked about it before, where like people that are cool in Christianity are not cool.
No, not at all.
This guy, Dave Runyon, he's not, I wouldn't say he's buddies with Polis, but Polis's, like, I guess, evangelical faith advisor. And during the season of masking and all of that and lockdowns, we're getting emails from Dave about phone calls about how the faith community could be more involved. And so we've known about his kind of activities. Well, they have a Colorado Prayer Luncheon annually. I'd like to go next year. I think it'd be very fun. And this is an event for faith leaders, business leaders that from the Christian community to gather together, about 1,000 people. And they have the governor and mayors and represented there. So Mike Johnson from Denver was there. Jared Polis, our governor, was there. And what occurred from attendees that we knew, multiple witnesses, was that Dave held up 2 letters. One was pretty acerbic. One I probably wouldn't write. That was condemnatory towards the governor, right?
Correct.
And one was more, you might say, nuanced and less direct, less clear on the wickedness of the bill. And he held up that one as like the example. So it was an effort in tone policing is what it was, the Christian community, all while Polis is in there. And so I don't know what his motivations were. I don't really know the guy. But this became kind of something you decided to say on Facebook, saying, hey, you should just stick to golf tournaments. Don't do that kind of stuff. Don't tone police the Christian community when we're in a fight. Yep. You know, it's kind of like looking at the guy next to you who's shooting at the enemy and being like, can you just like not shoot so much? You know, it's like, dude, we're in a fight. Like, we need to win the fight. And so I think what this does is it elicits a bigger question in my mind regarding, you know, some Christians may perceive that as like, why are you attacking other Christians? Mm-hmm. You know, why are you doing that? And so I wanted to, I have plenty of examples we could get into, but that's kind of, is that a fair framing? Is that a fair framing of the question?
Yeah. I mean, I posted it and I knew what I was doing when I did it, and I got a lot of flack from it. And, you know, I got cussed out from some Christians who said, you know, that's not behavior becoming of a Christian. I'm like, you're literally cussing me out right now.
Right.
Which is an odd way to go about it, but it is what it is. And I do know Dave. There was like a lot of things like, you don't even know him. Like, no, we've met several times. The golf tournament thing was funny because we played in a golf tournament together.
That's funny.
That's what you were there.
I was?
Yeah. Down at Denver Seminary golf tournament. Yeah. We did not win.
No.
I would have included that, but we didn't win. But the point there being was hey, like you said, you're tone policing while there's a fight going on, and people are like, well, why do you have to say anything? Well, you already said it. He's kind of a darling. He's an author. He's a guy who's out there. And what people don't realize is that oftentimes what we as pastors are going up against and are navigating is that there are these kind of more prolific people in our culture and society and in Christendom that have a voice, and they put stuff out there, and they get kind of just like elevated. And it's like, well, if they said it, it must be good and right. And I disagreed with what he was doing. What he did was he created a what I believe a false dichotomy between 2 letters, and attempted in a very subtle way, but nonetheless, I think he did this. Again, we don't know motives, and I do believe Dave's a Christian, and he's probably a great guy, you know. But what he did was he basically took people like us and people who were doing the rallies, fighting these bills, and just said, these people are too mean, too harsh on it, and, you know, we should be more like this. The problem is this that he wanted us to be more like is what actually led us to this point where this bill got passed.
Right.
And you have the governor sitting in the room, and you have an opportunity to say that what you're doing is wicked and wrong.
Right.
And I don't know how he could go about doing that, but I know how I would. And he doesn't have to do it my way, but there was a lot of other options in what he chose.
Right.
And so people in the Christian community, what it does is they'll look at him and they'll go, he did it this way, you did it this way. And then they presume because he's had a voice for a long time that he must be right in how he went about it, and that everybody else is wrong.
Correct.
And so it was actually an attempt to kind of just tell people, no, I disagree.
Right. Yeah.
Like, I disagree. Like,
right.
I don't think that that's helpful. I don't even think it's good.
Right.
And so that was the attempt there, and many people appreciated it. Many did not.
Sure.
And so, that was kind of what was going on there.
Okay. So then it's a bigger question in my mind. We see it nationally. We see it in evangelicalism. There's a lot of, fighting. And if we, I think we've talked about it before, but like it may not be your cup of tea. That's totally fine. But that happens, and we've taken a tact where it's like, we're okay with that. If people disagree with us, we're okay with that. We're not going to be sheepish about it. We're going to be loving. We're going to tell the truth. But we saw a lot of churches respond. We saw Flatirons, Jim Bergen issue a statement on his personal page, We saw Cherry Hills Community Church give an announcement without naming the bill or anyone who was involved, just saying like Christians should be involved in politics. So it's kind of tepid. And so it's hard as a pastor because I want to, believe it or not, I want to, and I think we both share this, to give charity as much as I can, because a lot of times we don't know what's going on in their life. Maybe they're busy. Maybe they're not online at all, and so they have no idea. I got tons of messages like, "Hey, do you know what's going on?" I'm like, "Yeah, I just spoke at the Capitol yesterday, and I've kind of been public about that, but they're just not online. That's totally fine." So there can be charity, but sometimes what I've seen is more of these what we make. I'm going to use kind of slang, normie, squishy, meaning pastors that aren't going to get involved in fights very often, or they're only going to like stick to like one line. They're saying a lot of stuff that you're just like, this isn't helpful. And it's actually the opposite of helpful right now. So I'm not going to name this guy because he's a Christian. He's a megachurch pastor in Denver. I think it's a megachurch. Southern Baptist, I believe, affiliated. But he posted this just a couple days ago. So the bill's already passed. It was signed into law. There's already lawsuits being levied against it, which is fantastic. But he said this: truth and love aren't opposites. They travel together. House Bill 2513-12 matters deeply, not because it's political, but because it impacts the freedom to live and preach the truth. As followers of Jesus, we're called to both courage and compassion. Let's be bold, not bitter, clear, not combative, loving, not silent. And then he posted a few screenshots. He said, this isn't about politics. It's about clarity, courage, and conviction. We will not compromise the truth. We will not lose love. We will not be silent. And then the last one said, pray, prepare, stay grounded. Let's raise the standard, not in anger, but in faithfulness. So I think this is a good example of kind of a general sentiment among more like normie evangelical pastors who are going to say these types of things. I wanted to hear kind of your thoughts as far as like, we don't want to be angry, we don't want to be bitter, all that kind of stuff, and framing it. And it's kind of another framing situation where it's like, look, we can speak about the truth, but it's not political. That's one thing. I think Pastor Brian Brown made a great post on this about how it is political. But what are your thoughts on that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think it's silly. It's just not, like you said, it's not helpful. Well, like when you hear that, the question that should come in your mind is like, what do I do?
Yeah.
And so he said, pray. Great. You should pray. Prayer oftentimes leads to action, though. And we're not advocating that everybody should act the same way. And so then you have to get into kind of a weird gray area of what I hear him saying is pray, stand firm, but don't be mean.
Correct.
Like if I'm just summarizing it.
Yeah.
Don't be mean. And that makes you have to ask the question, well, what is being mean?
Yeah.
And is it biblically permissible to be mean?
Right.
And what if the world says, well, that's mean, but the Bible says that it's not mean.
Totally.
Right? Like that it's good. And so I would just say, like, it's funny because you could just do the classic thing, right? Where you could do, now do COVID lockdowns.
Sure.
Now do, and here's the point in there. There's so many cases where you can pick. This bill, I think the reason it hit a nerve was because it is so blatantly anti-Christian that you couldn't not say anything.
Right.
Like you have to. And it's very fascinating, all these people speaking up now, like what you read, is a lot of these guys, they waited till it was passed. Like it's easy to speak late. It's easy to step up late. It's easy to try and feign that you're outraged when everybody's already outraged. Right. The funny thing about it is that is a political move that is being made. Yeah. He's actually being political in what he's doing there. Yeah. And the question is this, it comes down to a few things, but I think there's a really big one. I believe, like you already referenced in Brian Brown's post, but power is going to exist. Somebody's going to hold power. And the question is what do they do with that power? How do they wield it? And the Bible speaks to how those who are in government are to wield power and what their role is and what the role of the church is and in the world and all these things. We could get into different, like the spheres and all this stuff. I don't think that's the point of today. But the point being is that there is power to be had out there. In the Christian community, and what these guys are kind of pushing is that anybody who wants power or is going to take power, that's just not a Christian attitude. Well, the problem is that's not biblical. Is that it is fine for good men to go and take power away from evildoers.
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand what the problem is.
Well,
here.
I can articulate what the problem is, because I think I used to be of the opinion of the, maybe not the opposite opinion, but I used to entertain kind of like ideas. And there was a great post someone made this morning about this concept, where it's basically a lot of Christians have embraced an attitude that Christianity is only supposed to be a persecuted minority. So
Correct.
This guy framed it this way: if your only context for Christianity is a fledgling persecuted minority, then don't be surprised where it leads. And so for a lot of Christians, they've been inundated with literature and talking about how, and we know that martyrdom is a noble thing. God honors martyrs. God honors the persecuted, whether in America or Nigeria or wherever it may be. But there's this fantasy where that's the ideal Christian state. And we've been taught by evangelical leaders through books, publications, and podcasts that we should basically, the only good use of power, whether it's in the home, in the church, or in civil society, that the only good use of it is to give it away. This was used against particularly white pastors, which is funny. All the white pastors that were saying, and this was during the time of like talking a lot about racial reconciliation, all the white pastors that were saying this stuff, they still retained their power. You know, it was virtue signaling to the max, because they weren't giving up their seats to minorities. Anyways, but yeah, Christians become very uncomfortable. And I think the bottom line is, I've been trying to help Christians understand that when they hear the word politics, they typically are thinking of partisanship, which is its own topic, and I'm not opposed to partisanship. I think a lot of Christians are scared of being a partisan. I'm not scared of that at all, but I understand why they're cautious on that. But just thinking politics, like when this guy frames it that way, this is a spiritual thing, not a political thing. I'm like, but it is a political thing. It's literally a law being passed in politics.
Yeah.
Like at the baseline
So
level,
insane.
it's insane. So it is political. Like, you don't have to do this weird hide the topic and spiritualize it. And that's why I say it's harmful, not helpful, is because you're making Christians dumber. Like you're not only not helping, you're de-emphasizing real ramifications for Christians. You're continuing kind of this weird neutral public square fantasy land that you live in, where you say it's not political. Of course it's political. A lot of Christians are comfortable if we said all of life is spiritual. Everybody would be like, that's a good word, Pastor.
Yeah.
But if I say all of life is political, they become very uncomfortable very quick. But just going back to ancient definitions and classical understandings of politics, anytime we're in a social environment with other people where power is involved, where, prestige or exerting influence, that is a political act. Baseball leagues are political entities, HOAs.
Yes, they are. I can tell you all about that.
Politics is simply the matter of how we exercise rule, and rulership is something Christians should exercise in their life. They should have self-discipline. They should kill their sin. They should exercise it appropriately in their family in terms of how we respect the order of God's design for the family. They should exercise it in church and how we respect God's design for the church, and it should be exercised in society. And so this idea that Christians shouldn't be political, I just view this as absolutely unhelpful. Now, you can pick different people to attack. Like, I didn't name this guy. You can pick other people to name. I think a lot of Christians have the luxury, if they're in the pews, and I say this is a luxury, of kind of living in a naive state of like how power works in evangelicalism. Mm-hmm. And I don't fault them for that. So this isn't like me speaking down. It's more just being like, I actually envy that. It would be nice to go back to where it's like, I just read the latest Matt Chandler book. I have no idea, about anything he's done. It just seems like he's a good preacher. He communicates well.
Matt Chandler has a new book.
And so I kind of envy that posture where I can just be like, everything's happy-go-lucky, like everything's fine.
Yeah.
And we're saying as pastors, like we know some of these people. We know what they do. We know their convictions. We know what they've said. And when we call them out, I think a lot of Christians go like, why are you being mean to brothers in Christ? And I'm like, they literally, like Dave Runyon spoke publicly. He didn't call anyone from Fight 1312, our coalition, to ask us about our methods or challenge us. He just went out there and dropped bombs.
And we did reach out to him.
We did reach out to him prior to him engaging. He never replied. And so there's this idea where like you're not allowed to publicly criticize other leaders. This gets into like the 11th commandment where like Christians are very uncomfortable with like Andy Stanley, who's openly promoting, gay and lesbian stuff in his church. If you criticize him publicly, like, well, he's just trying to reach people with the gospel. I'm like, guy, come on. Like he's promoting false teaching. And so I guess my point is there can be prudence involved, but a lot of the pastors that are involved in the fight and a lot of pastors have a lot more detail about the industry specific kind of players and how the game is played than you might in the pew. And that's totally fine. It's the same thing in like the medical field, or if you're in sports or broadcasting or retail or whatever industry you're in, you're going to have specific insight into the players in that industry. Yeah. And we just so happen to be pastors, so we have specific insights into this particular vocation.
Yeah, I got to say some stuff. Yeah. Okay, hopefully we don't have to edit this out.
Sure.
But two primary thoughts. One is this, is on the whole entire, when pastors say, don't get political, or this isn't political, or Christians online are saying like, I hate it when people get political. You did a great job explaining that's like an impossible task. But here's the thing. If your disposition as a Christian is, I will not be political, then what you're doing is you're yielding all power to somebody who's willing to be political.
Yes.
So you're just giving it over.
Yes.
You're just like giving up. Yeah. It's just saying like, well, we don't want to have any say in how this is run or what laws are made, what rules we have to abide by. And you're literally giving up your freedom and your liberty in which God has given you in a nation that is founded on that. It's so idiotic that it makes me want to lose my mind every time somebody posts that online. There's a reason I don't post much, guys, because I just get so fired up on this. And it's not anger, it's just frustration, because it doesn't make any sense on any sort of logical basis. And people need to be educated. And you have to ask the question, okay, if I yield and give up political power, what do I get? You get HB 1312.
Yep.
You get leaders who are elected that will pass that bill in full, where they can come take your children away from you if you do not affirm their chosen gender. That's what you get. So when you say don't get political, what you're actually saying is give up. Yep. And that is not a Christian posture whatsoever. And Christians need to repent of that. I believe that that's just sad, and it's I'm hesitant to call it sinful, but it's somewhere right up against there. And so it really, really bothers me, because then I'll hear the same people complain. The other thing I would say is this, is a lot of people, when I talk to them privately, are very opposed, but they're really afraid of public perception. They're afraid of what people think of them. They've been trained in this whole entire idea of you're hurting the witness of God. I'm like, how about stealing our children? Like, how about that? Like, well, I don't understand where you're going with this. Like, and by the way, like, who are you witnessing to? Like, if it really is that, maybe test it first. Maybe test it first and see how that, like, if it actually is affecting it. And then when I get this kind of backlash from other pastors who are like, hey, Matt, you're speaking out, you're criticizing these people for what they're saying, how they're going about it, and maybe I could do better. Sure, you could always do better. But it's kind of like one of these things, like, you're being harsh towards these misguided people who, they're not, like, the other great thing that you hear all the time is they're not Christians. We can't expect them to abide by Christian things, which we could get into that. That's just silly on its face as well. But I'm like, these are not just misguided people sometimes. These are people that, like, when we were minding our own business, our church for the most part was just preaching the gospel like we were told, kind of doing our thing, trying to be obedient to Scripture. And we spoke about things like abortion, gender, all that kind of stuff from the Bible as we came across it in a text, not being super public, anything, just doing our church thing. And that led to a bunch of people coming after our church just by preaching the Bible, not being public, not posting anything. That led to a bunch of people coming after our church, and it led to us actually getting death threats from people regularly. And it's to a point now where it's not even scary anymore. We just kind of laugh at it.
Right.
And that might be shocking for somebody to hear. But it gets, so when I hear a pastor go, I can't believe you'd be mean, in my head I go, spare me, brother.
Yeah, I know.
Spare me. Like, no, like my family has been doxxed. Get out of my way. Like, I have no patience for that kind of attitude anymore, based off of what I've seen when I tried to do exactly what they said to do.
Yep.
That was my rant. Sorry.
That's great. No, and we have a pastor in our coalition, Pastor Chris Goebel. He's a military veteran. He worked in law enforcement. Now he's a pastor. And I love talking to him about this stuff because he's actually been shot at, you know?
Yeah.
And he's like, oh no, they said mean things online. He's like, whatever, dude.
Yeah.
He just does not care. And it's so fun and refreshing to talk to him because, yeah, I think with this political stuff, it's like when you have major evangelical players in a region or in an organization that are promoting this idea that Christians shouldn't be political, and then this stuff happens, they literally have nothing. They have nothing that they're going to do. They're not going to speak out. Now, maybe they're doing things behind the scenes. I can assent to that possibility. Maybe there's power broker stuff going on behind the scenes to get the bill gutted. That may be happening, but we are totally, as far as like our perspective as pastors on the ground in one of the most secular cities in America, we don't know anything about that. There's no communication because pastors like us typically get iced out pretty quick. If you're bold and courageous in your faith, you're going to get iced out of that evangelical community.
Well, and I love asking my favorite question. How's that working?
Right.
How's it working? If you are working something behind the scenes, I'm not seeing anything.
I'm not seeing much fruit
that comes out of that.
Right.
Like, where are the wins? I would love to be wrong, guys. Like, listen, we would love to be completely wrong. I will get online and be like, man, should not have critiqued this guy or this movement or whatever, and I was completely wrong. I would be thrilled to do that, but I just haven't seen any fruit. The bill got passed.
Yeah. And that's what this model, and we should probably wrap up because, I mean, we could keep talking on this. This should be like a Rogan episode. But a lot of the mindset of evangelicals, particularly in Boulder County and in Colorado, is basically a faithful presence model or a relational evangelism model, by which we mean just don't offend people ever, because that may alienate them from the gospel at some future point. You know, if you tell them transgenderism is demonic or stuff like that, or you just say, I disagree. You know, they're upset about climate change or something, or they're upset about how, you know, quote unquote trans kids can't get the care they need. And as a Christian, you're in that relationship either in the workplace or at the park or wherever it may be, that you have been taught to be quiet. Why? Because you don't want to alienate the relationship or harm the relationship, because maybe one day that person will come to a crisis point, or they might see how you're a loving, quote unquote, again, loving person who's not, quote unquote, mean, and maybe then they'll be curious about Christianity. And like you said, how's that going? It's not going very well. It's resulted in a church representation that's fairly anemic politically. It's weak. And a lot of Christians who are terrified. It's not rooted in a love for their neighbor. It's not rooted in actually a proclamation of the gospel. I would say it's rooted in a deep-seated anxiety and insecurity in what other people think about me. And that's been baked into the identity we have in Christ. So now we've laden it with Scripture. We've put these laws upon people that are that's a heavy burden. I mean, if you live that way, that is a terrible trap you're in, because you're constantly on edge and you're constantly having to go, well, I have to make sure that my lost friend knows that I'm not associated with bad, quote unquote, bad Christians, mean Christians. And so you're doing the same thing you would criticize people like us of doing. You're constantly castigating Christians who you view as too political or too partisan in order to gain a representation with people who want to mutilate children so that maybe one day they can come to know Jesus. But at that point, there's no confrontation of sin. There's no trying to unwind that clock of their false beliefs in terms of, like, let's say they've transitioned their child. Like, that the rate of somebody who transitions their child to become a Christian, God can do that, but that's going to be incredibly difficult for them because they're going to have to come to a realization of what they've done. And so it would be better to speak the truth in love now than to have kind of a fake love for your neighbor where you believe they're going to hell.
Yeah.
You believe there are real consequences for their actions. And we believe that for us too if we are not in Christ, but we've been found in Christ, and you are withholding that news. You're withholding that truth from them so that they'll like you more. I mean, help me, like, what's going on there?
Yeah. And the funny thing is, the accusation that we receive oftentimes is you're a keyboard warrior. What good are you really doing? And the funny thing is actually most of what we're sharing is actually coming out of doing ministry in real life situations in the context in which we find ourselves in. I have had conversations with parents who aren't Christians who are transitioning their kids because I live around them. And I've had those conversations. So it's not just getting behind a keyboard and just typing away and just accusing things. I'm actually seeing what happens there, having conversations with those people. And believe it or not, talked to one of them last night,
right.
Said hi to him, chatted with him in the front yard. We're actually very reasonable people and very loving people, but like we just can't stand idly by while wickedness goes on. And so being accused of just a keyboard warrior is a silly thing. It's a trope that people like to put out there. Let me I want to go a little bit positive because we have to do budget stuff after this.
Sure.
So I don't want to go do budget angry. But here's what I'd say. If we go back to what we've learned is God is using this, I believe, to wake up many Christians in our state and in our country. The amount of support nationally, you've gone on nationally syndicated shows, done interviews on things, but we've also just we got a letter in the mail the other day from somebody, just handwritten letter, just thanking us for speaking up and doing that. And so there's a lot of good happening there. But I think the big win is seeing churches wake up, seeing people in the pews ask their pastors, where do we stand on this? What are we going to do about this? How are we going to engage this? We're seeing more and more. And like you said at the very beginning, it actually is a slow process. And so we've learned like the cycle of how all this happens. And so we're more prepared than we ever were before. And we will continue to push and we will continue to fight well as God prescribes fighting. Though some might say, oh, these people are violent. We are not. That is a silly thing to say. We're going to fight with how God prescribes fighting, and we will stand how God tells us to stand, and we'll do everything we can to fight against wickedness and push it back. And it's really great to see more churches step in. And here's the thing: is we're actually very willing to have all kinds of Christians and all kinds of churches be part of that. And we were the normie church that would have not done the right thing right away. And so we actually have a huge heart for those guys who were like, man, I was just scared and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what my people would think. And I was worried about losing my church if I spoke up. We get that. We understand that. And there's a lot of grace to be had for people who come around on these things. I think that's a good thing. And so for people who might think, oh, they're just going to, if I do say, man, I missed the boat there, but I want to get it right going forward, that they're just going to hammer me and make fun of me. That's not true at all.
No,
that's not true at all.
God has done a merciful work and showing us how stupid we are.
Yes.
And we have a great deal of patience for those who would join us in admitting their own stupidity.
Yeah.
So, well, let's wrap up there. Hope this episode was a blessing. Obviously, we were pretty fiery on this topic. We could keep going for a while, but we want to wrap up here. Respect your time wherever you're listening, in the car, at home. Thank you for listening. Share this episode with a friend if you find it helpful. Give it a great rating online so that more people can find it. And you can always find us worshiping on Sunday mornings at 9:30 a.m. at 300 South Broadway in Boulder, Colorado. Would love to see you there. Join us for worship, and we'll see you next time.